apocalyptic violence, a belief in magic, an embrace of historical and personal destiny, a culture that communicates through image and spectacle, is a totalitarian culture. We have created, in the words of the great political philosopher Sheldon Wolin, a system of inverted totalitarianism. Inverted totalitarianism is different, he writes, from classical totalitarianism. It doesn't find its expression in a demagogue or a charismatic leader, but in the anonymity of the corporate state. In inverted totalitarianism, you have corporate systems that purport to pay loyalty and fealty to the Constitution and electoral politics and the language and iconography of American patriotism and nationalism, but have so corrupted the levers of power as to render the citizens impotent. What we have undergone is a coup d'etat in slow motion, and we have lost, and they have won. In inverted totalitarianism, economics trumps politics, which is different from classical totalitarianism where politics trumps economics. And with that inversion comes a different form of ruthlessness. The commodification of American culture, the commodification of human beings whose worth is determined by the market, as well as the commodification of the natural world, whose worth is determined by the market, means that each will be exploited by corporate power until exhaustion or collapse, which is why the environmental crisis is intimately linked to the economic crisis. Societies that cannot regulate capitalist forces, as Marx understood, cannibalize themselves until they die. And that's what we're undergoing. I want to end by speaking a little bit about resistance, what that means. I hope by now most of you have seen through the facade of Barack Obama, who functioned for the corporate state as a brand. He, I think in many ways, was similar to what we saw done by Benetton or Calvin Klein, where they used people of color and HIV-positive models as a way to associate their products with risque style and progressive politics. But the result was the same. It was to confuse a passive consumer that a brand was an experience, which is why just before Obama assumed office, Advertising Age awarded Obama their top annual award. He beat Nike, Zappos, Apple, and that's Marketer of the Year. We are not going to salvage either our environment or our country through electoral politics. I had lunch recently in New York with Father Daniel Berrigan, and I was asking him if he'd followed the elections, and he quoted his brother Phil and said, "If voting was that effective, it would be illegal." I think that from now on, all resistance is local. Food will become, very soon, a major political weapon. We are already creating in these post-industrial pockets food deserts. I wrote a story for The Nation magazine that they keep holding on Camden, New Jersey, which per capita is the poorest city in the country as well as the most dangerous, and there's no supermarket. The only outlets to eat are Church's Fried Chicken and local donut shops. It's essentially fat, grease. This is true in West Virginia, in the places that have been coaled out. Banks have packed up and left. The communities themselves are falling into irreparable decay. And these post-industrial pockets are growing and expanding at a greater and greater rate. And the corporate state is not going to step in to do anything to ameliorate the suffering, the human misery that that it causes. That's going to be our job. We are going to have to begin to build locally. We are going to have to remember that the true correctives to American democracy have never come from the top down. That the question, as the great philosopher Karl Popper wrote, is not how do we get good people to rule. Most people, Popper writes, correctly, who are attracted to power are at best mediocre, which is Obama, or venal, which is Bush. The question is how do we make the powerful afraid of us? And all of the social movements that were built, starting with the Liberty Party that fought slavery, the suffragists for women's rights, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, made the powerful frightened of them, which is why the last truly liberal president in the United States was Richard Nixon, because he was actually scared of movements and passed OSHA and the Clean Water Act and the Mine and Safety Act, all of which were written by Ralph Nader, who I voted for in the last election. And we have to recover that. We have to remember that it is not our job to take power. That's not our job. Our job is to remain fast around moral imperatives that we do not compromise on. It is our job to defend a dispossessed working class. It is our job to defend sick children. It is our job to defend those who are being tortured, abused, and killed in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan because of our rapacious and out-of-control war economy. And we have to be willing to get up and make personal sacrifices on behalf of these moral imperatives, even if at first we become pariahs. That is the only hope left. Anybody who's foolish enough to think that going to a ballot box at this point and voting for a Democratic candidate is going to change anything, I think is living in a universe that is as non-reality based as the Christian right. And if we can recover that ethic, if we can understand that rebellion or resistance is a way to safeguard our own integrity, our own individuality, if we can look down the long term and say, maybe not in our lifetime, but we will carry this for the generations that come after, then I think we can speak about hope. But if we refuse to do this, if we remain passive and complacent, then I think both our nation and finally the ecosystem that sustains human life is doomed. Thank you.